A total of 8 YSL members have taken a plea deal in response to RICO charges brought by the DA. While this might seem like a literal get out of jolly card, there is more to it than meets the eye, and as I'll get into, it's a trap. The RICO case. Let's start off with the basics. As you may know, Young Thug and other rappers have been hit with what's known as a RICO case, which stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. This charge was introduced in the 1970s when the US government was desperately trying to target the Italian mafia. They discovered that the leaders of the mob had squeaky clean records and were getting lower-ranked members to do their dirty work. So whenever the police arrested members of the mafia, they never nabbed anyone who had any real power. So the US government decided to make it a crime to simply be a member of that gang. If you were seen as promoting or advancing the activities of a criminal group, then that was now enough for you to be criminally charged. Fast forward half a century later, and the RICO Act is being charged against members of YSL, which they believe is a criminal gang, and Young Thug is the dawn of this alleged mob. In May 2022, Young Thug, Gunna, and 26 others were charged with a 56-count Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act indictment. It was a moment that shocked hip-hop fans across the world. The prosecutors argued that YSL stands for Young Slime Life and is a gang, while the defense contends that YSL stands for Young Stoner Life and is a music label. While the music of Young, Gunna, and many others proves that this is a group making music, group members have also been involved in criminal activity. And if you tie their crimes into the work of a criminal gang, this means that charges can be brought against every single member, regardless of whether they committed a crime or not. So if Young Thug is part of a criminal gang and promotes this gang, this could fall under the RICO charge, as the YouTuber and criminal defense lawyer Bruce Rivers explains.
Anything you do to support the organization, anything you do, if you post media with social media with cash, saying Thug Life or YSL, or if you commit a robbery and give the money to the gang, or if you wear gang colors, anything you do can be used as evidence in the furtherance of a RICO charge.
The fact that Young Thug and Gunna could face decades behind bars hit headlines everywhere, and Gunna's response to this caused a mixture of outrage and confusion. Gunna's release.
The deal that set Gunna free, a major development in a huge racketeering case. The Atlanta-born rapper, Gunna, whose given name is Sergio Kitchens, made a deal with prosecutors and walked out of the Fulton County Jail late this afternoon.
Gunna was offered a plea bargain, which is an agreement between the prosecutor and the accused in which the accused pleads guilty in exchange for a lesser sentence or a reduced charge. This deal is seen as a compromise for both sides. The prosecution gets a guilty verdict and the defendant receives a much more lenient sentence. And both sides don't have to go to a trial, which involves a lot of time and money for both parties involved. Furthermore, the US court system has quite a heavy workload, and one of lightening this load is through these deals. Gunna is clearly a prominent member of YSL, the music group, but the authorities believe that he was not a major member of YSL, the alleged criminal gang. The general public thinks that most criminal charges go to a trial. However, it is estimated that 90 to 95% of cases are resolved through plea bargains. What Gunna did was the norm and not anything special. Gunna was offered a specific plea known as an Alford plea, which is a guilty plea in criminal court where the accused does not admit to the crime, but instead asserts their innocence. As punishment, Gunna has to serve 500 hours of community service, which primarily involves working with young people. 350 of those hours will be spent talking about the dangers of gangs. The fact that Gunna did not even have to go to jail led many to the conclusion that he was a snitch. Gunna and his legal team were quick to nip this in the bud and released a statement that said, "While I have agreed to always be truthful, I want to make it perfectly clear that I have not made any statements, have not been interviewed, have not cooperated, have not agreed to testify or be a witness for or against any party in the case." He also posted on Instagram. Is acting like they switching to a side, but it's only one side. Backlash against Gunna. Because Gunna is a hip-hop artist, this plea deal has somewhat tarnished his reputation. Shortly before his arrest, rapper Bam and Kivo paid Gunna $250,000 for a verse on one of his songs. After this shooting, Bam said that he wanted a refund. Mondo, a co-founder of YSL, was not buying this statement from Gunna and wanted him to admit that he panicked. He said, "I'm talking personally, on everything I love. I'm talking, I know what's going. Boy, you ain't supposed to do that, my brother. Even if I did be talking to nobody, everybody who got common sense, everybody who's been in the streets know, you do not, boy. You don't do no shit like that, my brother." He went on to say, "I always said, bruh, he was a good, genuine, but certain shit makes you do certain shit. You can't." say, oh, they tricked me, or oh, I ain't talked, or I don't know what's going on. Come on, my brother. It's certain shit you just don't do. And hey, boy, you crossed the line, my brother. You did that. And of course, 6ix9ine was quick to point out that when he snitched, there was a lot more outrage. He commented, why everybody's so quiet? When it was me, everyone had something to say. Rappers all of a sudden don't got opinions because it's y'all friends. Gunna did technically cooperate with the authorities, and when he was asked if YSL was a criminal gang, his response was yes. However, Gunna's plea deal cannot be used as evidence in court and therefore cannot be used against Young Thug. He cooperated with the authorities, but he did not say anything that incriminated anyone else. The only way that Gunna could incriminate Young Thug is if he is called to testify. However, as part of this agreement, Gunna will apparently not be called to testify at the trial of Young Thug. A source told Rolling Stone that it's understood that the state is not going to call him as a witness. The source, who wished to remain anonymous due to the ongoing nature of the YSL case, explains. That's why the plea agreement is written exactly the way it is, because the whole idea was the state wasn't going to call him, and they didn't want the defense to call him either. If you look at what was said in court, that stops the defense from calling him, but also indicates that he's never going to testify for the state. The source contends that the aim of the plea is to neutralize him and keep him out of the game. As a part of the deal, Gunna also has to stay away from any guns and cannot interact with the co-defendants. Apparently, if he wants to contact other people at YSL, he needs to do this through his attorney or through people at YSL who are not co-defendants in the RICO case. This could mean individuals that work at the label, but basically, Gunna struck a deal where he doesn't have to go to jail or doesn't have to testify against Young Thug. Other YSL members were not so lucky. Blood is thicker than water. The other plea deals would be this straightforward. The police have different charges against different YSL members, so will have different deals struck with them, and they also might have different ulterior motives. As the Rolling Stone source says, there are some members they want to neutralize, and there are others that they probably want to cooperate with. If you think that Gunna is a snitch and betrayed Young Thug, then you will have to level the same accusation at Quantavious Greer, aka Unfun, who is Young Thug's biological brother.
Right now, the brother of rapper Young Thug is back behind bars. He was just booked last night.
This is Young Thug's blood brother, but he also chose this option and doesn't view himself as a snitch either. Greer is ordered to serve 750 hours of community service. He also not allowed any guns either. The part where it gets tricky for him is that he needs to follow a curfew. He needs to be in his home between 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. unless he is working, going to school, or a medical emergency arises. As I'll get into later, this is a pretty big deal. Another difficult aspect of this is that he has 10 years of probation. So he is a free man, but will spend the next decade with these constraints hanging over him. And perhaps the worst of all is that he will have to testify if called upon. So that must make him a snitch, right? Well, not exactly. If this man is called to testify in a trial where his own brother could spend decades behind bars, it is highly likely that he will plead the Fifth Amendment. As you may know, this is the right to remain silent. You can refuse to talk if you feel that by speaking you might say something that might incriminate you. So if Greer is called to the stand, he will plead the Fifth and can avoid snitching on his brother. But pleading the Fifth is a bit more complicated, as this lawyer explains.
But you cannot take the Fifth when it comes to testimony towards someone else or some other people that were involved in a crime.
Greer faced the same allegations as Gunna that he was a snitch, and like Gunna, he was quick to clarify that this was not the case. He wrote on Instagram, "Damn, people really think I told on my own brother SMA. Show me in my paperwork I told on anybody, LOL. I'm not even going to entertain any of it. Peace and blessings." Suspiciously long probation. Someone who has a fairly similar deal to Young Thug's brother is Antonio Obama Sumlin. He pleaded guilty to crimes such as violating Georgia's RICO Act, participating in criminal street gang activity, and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit a crime. The crime in question was murder, so Obama was in some pretty hot water when taking this deal. Fellow YSL member Cordarius Dorsey allegedly ordered Sumlin to kill a fellow gang member who allegedly disrespected him. Considering that he was involved in a murder, his deal was pretty good. The report said that Sumlin was sentenced to 15 years of probation under special circumstances set by the state. As part of the agreement, Sumlin is prohibited from contacting any of his co-defendants and again must adhere to a curfew between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. unless he is attending school, going to work, or has a medical emergency. 6ix9ine was quick to comment on this case and said, 15 years probation for attempted murder conspiracy. Probation for attempted murder is crazy. People doing more time for smoking weed. Obama has apparently agreed to testify at Young Thug's trial, but reserves the right to plead the Fifth. And because Obama and Young Thug's brother can plead the Fifth, it could be the case that the lawyers prosecuting Young Thug won't call them to testify, as this will make it difficult to get information from them. However, there were others who did not strike that good of a deal. On December 29th, Latavius Stevens, who also goes by Tick and Slug, was facing decades behind bars, and because of the plea deal, he essentially got back 10 years of his life. Slug is a co-founder of YSL, so faced much more severe charges than the aforementioned YSL members. He was presented with 520 years on the racketeering count, but through his plea deal, he will serve 10 years, with 2 of those years behind bars and the remaining 8 on probation. He pleaded guilty to robbing a woman, which was even referenced in a song by Young Thug.
Do you acknowledge that you've been accused of and arrested for robbing women?
Yes.
You acknowledge that you are the same person referred to as Tick in the song by Young Thug entitled You, in the verse, She Getting Robbed by Tick.
Yes.
He also confirmed the meaning of a text from Young Thug. The text read, "Y'all ain't beat him up or shot him yet. Y'all getting soft." And Slug confirmed that this text referred to them targeting an enemy. And here's where things get even worse for Young Thug. Slug has to testify, and not only that, he cannot plead the Fifth Amendment. If he is called to testify at Young Thug's trial, he basically has to spill the beans or face charges for lying or not cooperating in court. As far as I understand, he has to take a hit for himself or Young Thug, the useful witness. Antonio Mount Tunk Sledge has been thrown into a similar situation. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to violate the Racketeering Act and to being a felon in possession of a firearm. To quash these charges, he was given 15 years probation. Again, this is a crazy amount of time for someone to be on probation. As part of the deal, he gave up his right to the Fifth Amendment and agreed to testify in any trial, emerging from the indictment. It's pretty clear that if called, he will have to testify against Young Thug, and once again, 6ix9ine jumped in to give his 2 cents on this matter. In this case, he kinda has a point. He wrote, "It's very clear that boy got probation in exchange for his testimony. Can't even look into the camera." I would just keep scrolling, but it's funny how no one got the same energy for black rappers who openly on video cooperate with the law. But this all begs the question, why does he have to testify and can't plead the Fifth? One possible reason is because of the information he has. On January 11th, 2015, a man named Donovan Thomas was shot outside a barbershop in Southwest Atlanta. It was reported that Sledge has agreed to testify that after this murder, he and other YSL members were paid by Young Thug to lay low. And of course, this is not exactly damning evidence against Thug, but definitely useful for the prosecution when putting their case forward. So unlike Gunna, Sledge is someone that the authorities can use in the trial against Young Thug. Lil Duke was another person to take a plea, and his case is incredibly confusing.
Martinez Arnold, he is also known as Lil Duke. He pleaded guilty last month, and he has to testify truthfully, but doesn't have to call YSL a gang. I don't quite understand that.
I don't know. I don't know how these defense attorneys were pretty crafty in some of these plea deals.
Lil Duke was also accused of being a snitch, so went on to clarify that this was not the case on social media. Let's just say he wasn't too happy about being leveled with this accusation. "Yeah, I'm home, I ain't have to snitch to get here, kid. I admitted Young Slime Life was a gang cause it ain't illegal for no group look it up that don't hurt nobody. Anybody can be a gang post the founder already admitted it's stupid. What I posed to say if a founder admitted it. What I didn't do was say, yes, it's a fact. People in YSL commit crimes like murder and etc. Kuz Ion know none about that. However, he apparently has the right to invoke the Fifth Amendment if testified. Divide and conquer. The plea deals allowed the police to split YSL up as a gang and force them to act in their own individual interests. It was this divide and conquer strategy that worked really well for them. There are other YSL members whose plea deals have received less media attention. Winnie Lee, aka Slimeline Shawty, pleaded guilty and was given 9 years of probation. Walter Murphy is serving 1 year in jail and 9 years probation. This is a generous deal, given that he was accused of an attempted assault and a separate attempted murder. He is also named as a co-founder of YSL. He will be required to complete 300 hours of community service. Interestingly, he has also agreed to testify truthfully in any further trial as it may become necessary, re State of Georgia and the other individuals. However, there were some YSL members who were not of the same mindset. Tanquarius Nard Mender and Durante Beebe were offered plea deals and decided to turn them down. This is particularly surprising for Nard, who faces a maximum sentence of 50 years. The judge explained to them the risk that they were taking by bringing themselves to trial.
There's one thing about trials, it's uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen. So you got to beat 4 counts.
Added to that, both of them must have previous convictions, as the judge then talks about the recidivist statute in Georgia, which basically means that if they are found guilty, the judge has to deliver them the maximum sentence. And in Beebe's case, this is 50 years or half a century behind bars.
I have to, under the law, sentence you to the maximum sentence. And then whatever I sentence you to, you serve to the door. That's not anything I have any discretion over.
And by now, you might be wondering, why didn't Young Thug just accept a plea deal? Well, the simple answer is that he wasn't given one. As the Atlanta journalist George Chitty explains, for everyone talking about how Young Thug is standing strong by not taking a plea agreement, the district attorney's office isn't offering Jeffrey Williams any deal that doesn't leave him in prison forever. He's the target of this case. Everyone else is optional. People who are suggesting some kind of agreement where Thug instructed other YSL gang members to plead out so he can take the charges are missing the point. Thug doesn't have leverage. The conclusion from all of these deals is that the authorities seem to care about one person and one person only: Young Thug, the kingpin. Many commentators online have looked at this like a game of chess. There are some YSL members that are pawns and don't need to be taken out. They see Young Thug as the king, who they need to eliminate to claim victory. Young Thug serving a life sentence will be their checkmate. The DA wants to be seen as cleaning up the streets and taking down criminals. And if they take down someone as high profile and famous as Young Thug, this would be sending out a clear message to every other gang in Atlanta. Chidi said, "My read here is that the DA will deal out almost everyone else if it means improving their chances of convicting Young Thug. The operating philosophy as described to me by a ADA is to ask, absent this person, would this crime still happen? If the answer is yes, cut a deal. If the gang targeted someone for shooting, who pulled the trigger is less important to Willis's office than who turned on the green light. And the targeting of Young Thug is something that his lawyer has been very vocal about."
He's like the easy target. So if somebody gets arrested and gets in trouble and they want a deal, law enforcement officers are all too eager to say, "Well, tell us about Mr. Williams. Is he involved in this? What do you know about him?"
From his perspective, the plea deals can lead to testimonies from people who have been incentivized to testify against Young Thug.
That's the problem with this case. It's coming from the word of people who are getting deals to say, "Yeah, he was there, or I saw him around, or he gave the order, or I heard from someone else he gave the order." That's what this case is about.
And while he believes that it is unfair what is happening to Young Thug, he believes that this could happen to others too.
When you target a human being who's so well known, you make it so easy for the other person to say, "Oh, you mean I could be released from this location that I don't want to be? All I have to say is I know something about Jeffrey Williams." That's pretty scary.
As far as I can tell, the members were not given a bond and had to all stay in jail while this was going down. They were not able to group together and see how they could fight this case. Instead, the police gave them different plea deals and treated them all individually. The rapper Sheek Louch spoke about this case and said, "If everybody would have shut the up, nobody would have been in that much trouble. I mean, they know what they know, but still, there's no space for talking. That's making everything worse. That's why they separate you. They give you separate lawyers and do all that kind of shit." The plea deal trap, and the authorities are confident in their case. The prosecution has lined up 300 witnesses. For many gang-related trials, the prosecution is always concerned about the threatening and intimidation of witnesses. In fact, the prosecuting attorney Fonnie T. Willis even claimed that YSL had a history of intimidating witnesses. If there are only one or two witnesses, this could affect the outcome of the case. With 300 people, YSL would find it incredibly difficult to silence all of them if they are in fact a criminal gang. When putting all of these pleas together, you could argue that these deals have been a net positive for the YSL group as a whole, instead of the worst case scenario of them all spending decades behind bars. However, plea deals can sometimes be a trap. Firstly, I'm going to show you why plea deals in general are considered a trap, and then I'll get into why it's a trap for YSL specifically. In 2018, the Washington Post released a video named "The Plea Bargain Trap." When facing a trial, the defendant is usually waiting in jail. It could take months, even years, for the case to go to trial, and there is a point where the offer for a plea bargain expires, so the clock is ticking. The defendant's lawyer could assess the case and see how things are going to pan out, but this is not so simple.
But innocent clients can't tell you what actually happened because, for the most part, they don't know. You lay out the options for your client. He could go to trial, but a judge may detain him, which means waiting in jail for months, if not years, before a jury hears the case.
Lawyers, by their nature, take as little risk as possible, and sometimes the most risk-free option is to take the plea bargain, even if it involves telling an innocent man to plead guilty.
The idealist in you hopes that your client will fight. You think he could win. But the realist in you recognizes that if he loses, he will go to prison, potentially for decades.
During these plea bargains, the judge will ask the court if anyone knows of a reason why they should not accept the defendant's guilty plea.
You want to shout, "Yes, Your Honor. This plea is the product of an extortive system of devastating mandatory minimums and lopsided access to evidence. My client faced an impossible choice. He is saying what is necessary to avoid the possibility of losing his life to prison." Instead, you reply, No, Your Honor.
But when it comes to YSL, things are a bit more specific. The probation trap. In the USA, the average probation time that someone will spend on probation is just under 2 years. The whole idea of probation is to temporarily supervise someone to make sure that they are capable of going back to being a regular law-abiding citizen. But the probation time given to YSL members doesn't really seem to have this in mind. Slug is facing 8 years probation, Young Thug's brother has 10, whereas Obama and Mount Tunkus are serving 15 years probation. It's not unreasonable to think that during this incredibly long period of time, these members will break some of these rules and be in court once again. Firstly, there is a curfew. Many YSL members need to be home by 10 p.m. every night and will need to curtail their social life seriously. The deals have basically taken them off the streets, and of course, any illegal use of illegal drugs could seriously damage them. And this is from a group named Young Stoner Life. Some of them, if not all, will have a drug addiction that will force them to consume illegal drugs and put them in danger. They will be subjected to random drug tests too. Furthermore, the plea bargain requires them to have absolutely no contact with any of the co-defendants. Through these plea deals, the police have essentially broken up a huge part of YSL. In an interview with Vlad TV, the rapper Boozy said that it makes you into a rat recycling pen. He explained, "You're a rat recycling pen. You get recycled in a pen every 3 years. You're a rat recycling pen. You're gonna go in, they're gonna let you out after 2 years, back on probation, back on probation, back on probation until it's 30 years, till you got you 60 years old still going down there to the place with no teeth in your mouth." So let's take a look at what happens if any YSL members violate their probation. The Bullard Law Firm has a full breakdown of what happens if you violate probation in Georgia. A technical violation can include something like not tuning up to see your probation officer or leaving your designated jurisdiction. The maximum punishment for this is the revocation of 2 years of probation, which means 2 years in jail. The YSL members may have special conditions for their probation. The Bullard Law Firm gives specific examples of these, such as attending courses, abstaining from alcohol, or avoiding certain people. The maximum punishment for violating this probation could mean revoking your entire probation period, which will be replaced with jail time. And lastly, there is a substantive violation of probation. This is when the person on probation commits a crime. This could result in 2 years in jail, but could have more severe consequences, such as heavy fines, incarceration, additional community service, or the extension of probation. The DA's first catch. You would be surprised to know just how many people are in prison merely for violating probation. In 2019, the Council of State Governments Justice Center found that 45% of state prison admissions nationwide are the result of violations of probation or parole, either for new crimes or technical violations. In 20 states, including Minnesota and Missouri, more than half of admissions are due to supervision violations. And the report states that 95,000 people are incarcerated as a result of technical violations on any given day. It's wild to think that something as minor as missing a curfew could be something that ultimately leads someone to end up in prison. So for the YSL members, it is almost a case of not if, but when they violate these probation rules. And the fact of the matter is, one of these members has already broken their promises. Young Thug's brother Unfunk violated his probation on May 4th and was arrested for possessing a firearm by a convicted felon, participating in a criminal street gang, as well as window tint and seatbelt violations. He has been sentenced to 9 years and 6 months in prison. The judge did not have a lot of sympathy for him.
Mr. Greer, I take no pleasure in us being here again, but do you recall when I sentenced you on the 20th of December that I went through certain things that you were expected to do at that point in time?
Some people might think, well, he only has himself to blame. However, Greer probably lives in an area where carrying a gun is something that he needs to do out of necessity. Getting caught by the police was preferable to being caught without a gun by someone on the streets. And of course, the probation terms and the lifestyles that these YSL members lead meant that it was only a matter of time. You could look at Greer as the first person to fall into this trap, and the police might be thinking, well, that's one down, 7 more to go.